A 2-year-old shows up at the border all alone. Why even law enforcement was shocked. Plus, the cabinet is full and the grade is in. What the country is saying about Donald Trump's picks and the airport strike as Americans take to the skies. That's Topping the Hill on NewsNation tonight. All right, so is it an indicator of what's to come or just a one-day move? All three major stock indices up today, and the Dow closing at an all-time high as the market had its first chance to react to Scott Bessent, likely becoming the Treasury Secretary. A live look right now, Mar-a-Lago, where Donald Trump celebrated. Jack Smith announcing today that he is dropping the federal election charges against the president-elect. Trump calling it a quote-unquote political hijacking. Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. But first tonight from The Hill. S-E-I-U! 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 A strike underway throughout the day at one of America's most important airports. Service workers, as you saw there at Charlotte's main airport, on the picket line ahead of one of the busiest travel times of the year. Mick Mulvaney and Ashley Davis joining me in a moment to answer this question. Why wouldn't every major union strike at this point, given the current political setup? But first, our Joe Khalil on why these workers are striking throughout the day. Hello, Joe. So Charlotte, one of the biggest airports, we saw them on the picket line. Why are they doing this now?
Well, they're trying to make a statement. And Blake, it's rare that the when matters as much as the what. But in this case, you've got the SEIU workers striking 3 days before Thanksgiving. They are trying to make a statement, and they're doing it on a couple days before what the airport says is going to be their busiest Thanksgiving that they have ever had.
So what do they want?
They're talking about more wages. They're talking about better working conditions, because these are the people that clean the planes, that take people through the airport. They say that they're making mostly $12 to $19 an hour, depending on what their job is, how long they've been there. Many of them say that is not a living wage in the Charlotte area right now. And so they're asking for more money. We do have a soundbite. Take a listen quickly what some of these guys have said.
We're not treated fairly. We're not paid fairly. We're not respected in our jobs of what we do. And we just want higher, more wages and a little respect.
So, like, look, a lot of these people, again, they just say what they're looking for are better wages. It's a 24-hour strike. So in terms of real impact on flights, right now, I think there are about 85 flights that have been impacted out of several thousand. It's not making major delays, but what they want is just for people at this point to pay attention. That's what they're saying.
That they are. Joe K. with us tonight. Joe, thank you. All right, so the one who could be dealing with strikes for the next 4 years in part is Lori Chavez DeRemer. She's the outgoing Republican congresswoman from Oregon who just lost re-election. But she also could be the incoming labor secretary, as she was nominated by the president-elect Friday evening. Now, that decision from the next Republican president, celebrated by the head of the Teamsters Union, Sean O'Brien, posting this photo with the three of them, writing of Trump, quote, "You put words into action." Joining me now, Ashley Davis, former George W. Bush White House official, Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation contributor, former Trump White House chief of staff. Hello to you both. Thanks for being with us. Mick, welcome back to the U.S. after a well-deserved break. Let me start with you, Mick, because I'm looking at the dynamic here. Democrats, they are pro-union. And now there could be a labor secretary who supported the PRO Act, pro-union, who's backed by the Teamsters Union. And this isn't a Republican administration. So I ask the basic question, if you're a major union in this country and you see the lay of the land, why wouldn't every major union strike with that being the backdrop?
Yes, but here's what I think you're seeing. And it's a fascinating possible realignment. You're right. Traditionally, during our adult lifetimes, Democrats have been the party of unions and Republicans have been the party for management, right? I do think you're seeing that change, but it's not as broad-based as some people have suggested. I don't think it applies across the board to all unions. I think what you might be seeing here is a realignment within the Republican Party towards the manufacturing unions, towards the Rust Belt, towards the blue-collar workers. I still think there's a great deal of disdain amongst Republicans for the government workers unions, for example, the teachers unions, for example, and maybe the SEIU. So you're right. if you're a manufacturing union, I don't know if it's right to paint with a broad brush and say it's going to be an easy time for all unions across the country.
So what about this, Ashley? Because obviously when you strike, it is short-term pain for hopefully long-term gain for many of these folks. They live paycheck to paycheck, so striking is real. But I'm just surveying and hearing what Mick says, and if I'm ahead of one of the major unions, especially as Mick points out, and anything to do with manufacturing, I'm supported by both sides here, so why not?
Yeah. But I agree with Mick 100%. I first want to talk about her the Congresswoman, because if you look at her district, she made friends and supported the builders' unions, which is kind of an extension of what Mick was talking about, because that was what her district needed. So everyone's kind of up in arms, but she's not necessarily with the extreme labor unions.
She did support, though, the PRO Act, which is friendly toward the unions. Every single Democrat voted for the PRO Act in this Congress. Only 3 Republicans did, and she was one of 3.
Yeah, she was a co-sponsor of the bill.
Co-sponsor,
actually. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously there's that. But I do think that she's friends with and supports more of the Republican-friendly unions. But I don't think this should be any surprise that Donald Trump is supporting some of these unions, because this is more of his populist view. I mean, first of all, the last time someone really supported the unions with a Republican was H.W. Bush. So 30 years ago, with the math.
The best Sunday business in the show, The Hill Sunday with Chris Stirewalt, talked to Congressman Don Bacon about this. Mick, I'll get your reaction on the other side.
She's now going to be a Secretary of Labor under President Trump. She's going to follow his direction, and I believe he would be very unlikely to support all the features of the PRO Act, and she's going to follow his direction. So I think we'll be fine.
Is Don Bacon right, Congressman Bacon right, Mick, that at the end of the day, whether it's the labor secretary or essentially, for the most part, whoever, that they're just following what Donald Trump wants to do in the agenda there, whether he supports what they did in Congress or not?
Yeah, if I'm the president, that's what I want my cabinet secretaries to do. I don't want them to go off on their own and sort of freelance. But what I think you're seeing here, something you've seen with Donald Trump before, is that folks always accuse Trump of, he's only going to hire loyalists who agree with him 100%, and that's not the case. I mean, this is the man, keep in mind, who hired John Bolton. Now, I don't think they ever agreed on anything. He likes to hire people who look at the world slightly differently than he does, so he gets different perspectives. So she's a little bit more pro-union. That's fine. There's going to be other folks in the administration who are more pro-management, and they're going to play that out as part of the policymaking process. All
right, Mick, stay there for a second, because you had a fascinating article in The Hill. The headline was great. Can Elon Musk teach an old Doge new tricks? And here's what you write. You say, there is something they need to fully grasp from the outset, meaning Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk. The federal government really, really doesn't want to be reformed. In fact, fixing it might make catching rockets look like child's play. And to your point, Mick, I noticed a post on X that Vivek Ramaswamy put out within the last half hour or so. And here's what he wrote. He said, yes, it's true that cutting bureaucracy will reduce the federal deficit, but the real win will be its pro-growth effect. The biggest cost of bureaucracy isn't the headcount costs. It's that bureaucrats find legally dubious things to do that stifle freedom and depress our economy. And I'm going, is he acknowledging there that firing people isn't going to be easy? And thus talking about pro-growth and not necessarily about firing government workers?
Look, I have nothing but respect for what these gentlemen are trying to do. I was the last person in charge of government restructuring, and I failed miserably. I hope they do much, much better than I did, okay? But Doge isn't a real thing. I mean, the Department of Government Efficiency, it's a PR campaign. There's no statutory authority. They'll have the ability to sort of shine the light on abuses and problems within the bureaucracy, and God bless them for that. But how is that going to translate into real action? 2 ways. Number one, then they will try to put pressure on Congress to change the laws, to change civil service rules so you can fire people. And then also, and this is absolutely critical, they can work through the Office of Management and Budget, which controls the flow of money out to all those federal agencies. So everybody talks about Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk. Right. I get that. Those are the big names. The most important name in this bureaucracy project is going to be Russ Vought, who's been tapped to be the director of the Office of Management and Budget, the most important person in Washington that no one knows.
You're a successor over there at OMB.
You're missing your job, Mac. I also do think that, someone like Senator Ernst, who was named to kind of be the head of this for the Senate, that's where if there is legislation they can cut, she could be,
Okay.
be important.
All right, we'll leave it there. Mick Mulvaney, thank you, sir. Welcome back. Nice to have you back stateside. Ashley Davis, see you later in the show. Appreciate you both. Thank you. All right, meantime, as the president-elect and his cabinet nominees get the ball rolling for the incoming administration, the Trump transition is so far, well, for the most part, I guess you could say, getting a little bit of a thumbs up. New polling finds Trump starting on a positive note. Most Americans approve of his presidential transition handling. Here with me now to break it all down. Remember, I told you someone has the best Sunday show in the business. It's that gentleman right there, Chris Steigerwald.
Me? It's mine?
Host of the Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprises.
Isn't that fine? Okay. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of loose talk about a CBS News poll, which is mid. Okay. It's an online poll. We don't like to use it too much.
All right.
What we do like to use is a Pew Research Center. This is primo polling. How do people feel about Donald Trump? They cold, very cold. 42% warm, 9% neutral. Okay, so that's not super, but look at this.
Okay.
Look at Trump then and now. When he was coming into office the first time, 41% approval for his transition. 2024, 53. That's a 12-point bounce.
It's a big movement.
Yeah, it's a big movement. It's a different country.
Right.
It's a different Donald Trump. It's a different circumstance. But we thought, let's put it in perspective, because that's what we do.
Yep.
So how does this compare to where Joe Biden was when he was replacing Donald Trump? A little lower, 5 points. That's not that much lower.
Right.
And of course, we have to remember the country was in a pandemic and people were sick. Okay, but how does it compare over time? Trump beats himself, but comes in behind. And look at that.
Wow.
Barack Obama. But now let's add it in. Let's go all the way back to the beginning of the century and look at all the way back to George W. Bush for Ashley Davis. We'll throw it in. George W. Bush, 58%. So you see, Trump is now what we'll call in the normal range. He came in the abnormal range 8 years ago. Now he's coming in what is basically the normal range. But here's something to remember.
Okay.
How did Obama get that 72%? How did Biden do that? Because things were really, 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 really bad.
Yep, the great financial crisis for Barack Obama.
The financial panic of 2008, which torched everybody's 401k, rocked their housing market, did all of that stuff. The higher your number here, and this is something to remember, the higher your number here, you could also think of this as an expectation score, right? Okay. So you come in with high expectations. People say, he's going to make everything better. He's going to do it all. You got to deliver. Joe Biden went from 58 to 38 in a lot less time than he meant to because people didn't think that he was delivering on those promises. So that is the debt that an incoming president owes. It's good to have a bounce, but it's also what you owe.
Let me ask you a question. So I'm looking at Donald Trump, 53%. And at the popular vote, he was at about 49%, give or take. Is that delta there just polling noise, or is that folks saying, okay, maybe I didn't vote for you, but I see what you're doing and I'm with it?
So the question Pew's asking here is, do you approve of the transition? How do you think the transition is going? And what Donald Trump has done this time, Matt Gaetz, sorry, but with the couple of exceptions, people have said, this seems to be okay. This seems to be all right. If you remember 8 years ago, the person most surprised in the United States that Donald Trump won the presidency was Donald Trump. Right. They had no transition. There was a mess, and they were trying to fix it. They were trying to repair the engine on the car while they were driving down the interstate. This time, he has a plan and he has people.
You know what one of the differences, too, this time? Because I remember being there in Trump Tower in the lobby last time. It was like, who just went up the elevator? Who just came down the elevator? And it was all on camera.
Last time was a reality show. This time there's more discipline and order.
More discipline, order, much different. Steigerwald breaks it down. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, still to come here on the Hill. The F-35 warplane. Look at that thing. The country's most expensive weapon. So why is a new declassified report posing serious questions about if the military got this one right? A retired general joins us on the other side of the break, plus a 2-year-old girl picked up at the border after traveling alone from El Salvador. What she was carrying that could offer clues to her journey. And he has the most popular podcast in this country. So what kind of influence is Joe Rogan already having in the world of politics? Hello from Washington, I'm Blake Berman. This is the Center of Politics, and you're watching The Hill. We're back in 4 minutes. to the Hill on NewsNation. So could this be a national security issue for the incoming Trump administration? A declassified report is revealing a major security soft spot for the F-35 fighter jets, America's most expensive weapon system ever. Now, among the many concerns, a highly redacted government report details, for example, quote, the F-35 lethality assessment suffered from the inability of the F-35's gun to hit targets because of design and installation issues. Maintenance issues don't sound much better. For example, quote, the backbone, that is for maintenance support for the F-35 aircraft squadrons, depend on its day-to-day flight operations and maintenance activities, demonstrated poor usability and impeded rather than facilitated effective maintenance operations. Joining me now is Lieutenant General Richard Newton, NewsNation senior national security contributor, former Air Force member, Assistant Vice Chief of Staff, and former Director of Air Staff. Hello, sir. Thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. This is a very basic question. How's this possible?
Well, Blake, good to be with you. I was the first B-2 stealth bomber squadron commander back in the 90s. We went through a lot of throes in terms of the aircraft itself based on its original design and then going through a number of stages and testing stages. And finally, when I got my hands on it, it was the first operational commander. So I relate a little bit to these challenges. Now, the F-35 is still the most lethal, most capable fighter aircraft ever designed and flying today. Okay. But there are some challenges here, as you say in this report. As we go through, we do a number of reviews of the aircraft. The fact that it's now going from certain block capabilities into future block capabilities, we add capabilities to the weapon system itself. It still has some organic challenges, as the report said. So the bottom line is here, yes, it's still the most capable fighter we have, but it's got some challenges to go through to make sure that it's fully mission operational and capable once some of these designs are addressed.
Yeah, I think most folks who would look at this, though, would say, I mean, $2 trillion, $2 trillion with a T is going to be the long-term cost of all this. And, I mean, you remember last year, Lieutenant General, we lost one of these things, not overseas, not in some foreign country. We lost one of them in South Carolina, and we couldn't track the thing for basically the entire weekend it took to find an F-35. I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate the difficulty of this, or maybe I can't appreciate the difficulty of this. But I guess it just comes back to, if this is going to be a $2 trillion program, why are we here right now?
Well, you and I were on air when we talked about that F-35, as I recall, on that Monday. Yeah. The challenge here is the fact that, again, this system, this weapon system has some challenges. It's had some challenges from the beginning. And as with any other weapon system, or particularly this sensitive and capability of this weapon system, it's going to cost, some more dollars and some more efforts to fix the problems that we're either discovering right now that were organic with the original testing and production of the aircraft. And certainly as it becomes more operational, you discover some of these challenges. It's going to take some fixes. I don't have a good news answer at this point, Blake, but I do know they're going to get to the bottom of it. They're going to find out. They're going to discover exactly what's wrong with the weapon system or some of the corrections. And what we used to call it, I know in the B-2 program, which is an outstanding effective bomber today, create some workarounds. Whether or not it's going to have to go back and do some basic design changes, I don't think that's the case here. But you are going to have some workarounds. These workarounds are going to cost money to make it most operationally effective.
Okay. So here's Elon Musk. He says the F-35 design was broken at the requirements level because it was required to be too many things to too many people. Musk also went on social media today on his platform, or in the recent days, if it wasn't today, and talked up the idea that maybe drones are just at this point in time technologically better than fighter pilots, especially considering drones are unmanned and fighter pilots are manned. Would you agree with him there?
I wouldn't necessarily agree with. I think what I would agree with him on this point is that drone technology, where we're going with unmanned systems, that's the next leading edge capability that we have. But I don't think we're at a point now to have the most complex mission in the United States Air Force. That is the fighter mission, in order to for suppression of enemy air defenses, for shooting down, for maintaining air superiority, and so forth. I still think you need a fighter pilot in the loop to make that happen. But I do believe, however, that the next wave of technologies and capabilities, just like Elon says, is to go after unmanned aerial capabilities and use that as a complementary aspect of warfighting. I think there's a lot there, not only in air power, Blake, but also in land power and certainly in sea power, below the sea, stealth and unmanned capabilities are going to be the next wave. So that's where we're at. But I don't think we're ready yet to take the pilot out of the loop at this point.
All right. We'll leave it there, sir. Lieutenant General Richard Newton, thanks for being with us this Thanksgiving week. Hope you enjoy it. Have a good one, sir.
Thank you, Blake.
You got it. All right, still much more ahead here on the Hill, including, did you see this? A 2-year-old girl found at the southern border. How far she traveled and what she told authorities. We are live on the other side of the break. And a live look at Capitol Hill. Is the U.S. headed toward bankruptcy? We just mentioned Elon Musk. Did you see the dire warning that he put out? Plus, don't forget to download the NewsNation app for more on all the big stories and to watch us anytime, anywhere. The Hill. Back in a few.
Venezuela, mamá. Venezuela. Sí.
Welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. A heartbreaking scene along the U.S.-Mexico border over the weekend. That 2-year-old girl traveling unaccompanied, found by the Texas Department of Public Safety in Maverick County, carrying only, as you see there, a piece of paper with a phone number and a name. The girl, we are told, traveled from El Salvador. Now, NewsNation has frequently reported on the crisis of unaccompanied migrant children at the border. Thousands are lost in the immigration shuffle with no court dates, or worse, their whereabouts sometimes unknown, plus a high chance that migrant children are being exploited and trafficked. Our senior national correspondent, Brian Enton, is following this story right now for us. Brian, what do we know about this little girl and how she got there and where she might be tonight?
Yeah, Blake, I mean, it is heartbreaking. Covering the border, you see a lot. You see a lot of kids, you see a lot of families in desperate situations, but I don't know that we've really seen anything quite like this because this little girl is just 2 years old. She's in that little pink hoodie. She's holding, it's like a yellow Post-it note, and on the note there was a phone number and it said Mama Patty, and she was able to tell the Border Patrol there that she was from El Salvador. But she kept saying that she was alone. I mean, you'd have to imagine she was, at least someone was sort of keeping an eye on her. But she was in a group of about 200 migrants that were crossing together. 60 of them were unaccompanied minors, which Texas Department of Public Safety says they have never encountered a group with that many kids alone. 60 of them. The highest number they've seen before was about 50 a couple of weeks ago. This had 60 kids, but the 2-year-old was obviously the youngest. Listen to what the Department of Public Safety said out there. Take a look.
That 2-year-old, that's a very powerful video, just making contact with that 2-year-old little girl from El Salvador. All she had was a little piece of paper with a first name and a phone number, so not even an address. So we don't really know where this child is going to end up or who is that person, behind that phone number.
So basically what happens, Blake, is Border Patrol takes all of the migrants into custody, including the kids. But what happens with these kids is they end up going to the Department of Health and Human Services. They have shelters for kids. But exactly what happens to them, do they ever actually find the parents? A lot of that is still a mystery. And you said it at the beginning. I mean, there are thousands, 320,000 kids that have just gone basically missing.
Brian, how is it a mystery of what happens next? I mean, you're the best reporter I know. We have reporters on the border nonstop. This has been a major story for years now. I would think that there would be an answer there of sort of what comes next. I'm not directing this at you. It's just, it baffles me that that's the case.
Yeah, I think the issue is the federal government is very secretive about what happens to these kids once they're in their custody. Like the video that you see right there and the interview you just saw, that's from the state. The Department of Public Safety, the state officials will speak out. Once they get in Border Patrol custody and once they get in the Department of Health and Human Services, they won't really say much. I mean, you've seen they don't let people come in and look at the shelters very easily. A lot of it is done behind closed doors. But, I mean, the number 320,000 kids that they have lost track of. And you just think, I mean, if someone went out and tried to scoop this kid up or kidnap these kids on the border, no one would ever know. I mean, the parents aren't going to call the police. because they're scared. They're here undocumented. And no one ever really knows what happens to these kids, and it's really, really sad.
Brian Ensign reporting for us tonight. Brian, it's sad, and there's a lot of other feelings and emotions when you see that little girl there, again, just 2 years old with a Post-it note. Brian Ensign, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, full panel here with me now. Ashley Davis, former official in the George W. Bush White House. Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday. Emily Brooks, congressional reporter for TheHill.com. Scott Bolden, NewsNation political contributor. Hello to you all. Happy Monday on a week. I hope the week goes and ends a lot better than, obviously, seeing how it started for that one little child. What is the process, as far as we know it legally, when these kids show up at the border like this?
Well, they go into custody of the Health and Human Services, right? And they have shelters, but they're minors, so how do you repatriate a minor back to their country if you know? Do they go up for adoption at some point? But then how do you adopt them if they have no identity and they have no papers? They have to be treated as immigrants, if you will. I'm not an immigration lawyer, but they become essentially, I think they become custody of the United States until otherwise, whether it's a judge or they repatriate them or they get put up for adoption. That makes the most sense to me from a legal standpoint.
So Donald Trump's going to be the president of the United States in 50 days? Yeah, 50 days from today, I believe. What happens going forward, Ashley? Because I don't think this will full stop just because Donald Trump's in the White House.
No, and obviously this is the horrible and other side of the coin in regards to immigration and what's happening with the open border. But also you see the side of the criminals and what's happening in some of these areas around the country, that people are killing people or, destruction. And then you have a story like this. But I also think because him taking over in 50 days, that her parents may not even be here. What you have been seeing a lot of are parents sending their children with other people trying to cross the border so they will have a better life here. And the reason that the numbers are so high this week and they were so high last week is I think that they're anticipating Trump having this mass deportation.
56 days to Inauguration Day, by the way,
56.
as I did a little math in my head.
Vernon means business. You've always got the numbers.
We've had a lot of Democrats on the show recently. Play that sound real quick, and then I'll pick it up on the other side.
I've never particularly thought that the border wall was anything more than a campaign symbol. I think there's other ways that you can secure a border.
It's largely symbolic. It's also enormously expensive.
Do you think it works?
No.
I don't think it works.
I mean, you can already see where they cut the holes in the wall to get through or go underneath it. I don't think there's any real trick there. What you really need are more border agents so that when they apprehend them, they can figure out whether they get to stay or go right there. And then you need more judges to handle the cases.
So that was Martin O'Malley, Emily, who's running to be the chair of the DNC, Congressman Glenn Ivey, who's a Democrat on the Homeland Security Committee. I haven't noticed, doing this show over the last couple of weeks, really a change in direction from Democrats after the election and before the election on how they view the border.
I think that Democrats certainly know it's a big issue. They know it's a big reason why voters were motivated to vote for Trump, and a part of the reason why Democrats think that he won, among other things. But I think that, when you're talking about Democrats in Congress, Trump is going to be able to do some things on border policy and how things are handled, maybe how they handle children. Will he be able to keep track of them? But when it comes down to a lot of the policies and the immigration system that Republicans do want to change, that is going to have to go through Congress. And that is going to be very, very difficult in the slim majority in the House and not a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate.
She covers the House, or she covers Congress, both chambers, right?
Yeah, the House.
The House is your specialty. It is the slimmest of margins, Chris, so put a bow on this for me. What happens when you see that, when you hear what Democrats have been saying, when you know what Donald Trump wants to do, what's the reality come January 20th and beyond?
Well, I think Ashley makes a very good point that the advertising component of this, that if the people in Central America say, okay, people aren't going to be, it'll be harder to get in now that the flow may change. But the cautionary tale here for the incoming Trump administration is what happened to Democrats. When Joe Biden was running against Donald Trump, they thought it would be easy, right? We're going to undo what Donald Trump did. We're going to get in and we're going to change all the rules. And it took them 3 years before they said, we erred. What Trump has to do is figure out a way that he can make changes that will not generate blowback from the electorate. We think about kids in cages and the way that hurt Republicans in the first Trump administration. It's finding the sweet spot for enforcement that doesn't overdo it and generate the kind of backlash in the other direction that Biden experienced last time.
And he can do it through legislation. He's got the majority, slim as it may be.
Who
this might be the time.
Well, legislation.
Maybe he will, but this is the best way to fix the border because they're going to keep coming. The wall's not going to stop them from coming.
I would just note, in the first Trump administration, the first thing that they tried to do was repeal and replace Obamacare. It didn't happen. The second thing that they tried to do was get tax reform done. That did happen. So you have to wonder, I sit back and wonder, will things be different this time around? Because now it's a decade later and Trump clearly has a grasp of the Republican Party, or if legislating is still legislating.
If only Nixon can go to China, maybe only Donald Trump can forge a deal on immigration. Maybe only Donald Trump could do a comprehensive deal on immigration if he can find Democrats who want to work with him.
All right, still to come here on The Hill, from podcaster to political influencer, Joe Rogan becoming a bigger voice. So how has he changed the media landscape? How has he changed politics? Did you hear what he had to say the other day involving one of the biggest issues? We're back in a few.
The fourth Thursday in November, it's the day America gives thanks. At NewsNation, we give thanks to all Americans as we remember our loved ones and this great country we call home.
Back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So as we were quite literally talking there about what Donald Trump could do on day one as it relates to immigration, he posted the following on his platform, Truth Social. And I'll just pick out one sentence for you here. Trump says, quote, on January 20th, as one of my many first executive orders, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the U.S. and its ridiculous open borders. Chris Steyerwalt, it makes it, this seems like Trump saying, if you don't get control of your borders, I'm going to tariff your products.
Yeah, for Wall Street and for people watching the economy, it's the Trump giveth and he taketh away.
Right.
So
good day on the corner of Wall and Broad today.
Right, because they say, oh, this is great. Scott Bessent is great. Normie for Treasury Secretary. This is going to be wonderful. And then as the sun goes down, Donald Trump says, maybe I'm going to blow up the North American, well, what are we supposed to call it now?
USMCA.
The USMCA. That we're going to blow that up. And I'm the Nuevo NAFTA. And I'm going to blow it up, and I'm going to put a 25% tariff on all of this stuff, and then everybody will scramble. This is what Trump does, right? He is a disruptor, and his fans like it, but it creates a lot of turmoil.
And it hurts the economy, too.
Well, maybe. We'll see. Not today.
He hadn't put tariffs in yet.
The game is over, and now they can celebrate. Arizona State with the win.
All right, so Arizona State University fans storming the field this weekend at the end of the game against BYU in what would amount to a wild finish. Now, you might be wondering what on earth this has to do with politics. Nothing, actually, nothing. But here's what I want you to try to visualize. ASU Stadium, you see it there, holds 55,000 people and was sold out on Saturday for the big game. You can see how big the crowd there really is. Now, I want to show you something else. The U.S. national debt just hit $36 trillion. Now, on this pace, we could hit $55 trillion, our national debt, in about a decade from now. All right, so back to that image. 55,000 fans in Tempe, Arizona this weekend. Now, think about it this way. If every individual on that screen there amounted to $1 billion in debt, that's $55 trillion. So for every billion that Washington talks about cutting, and that's a lot of money, Think about it this way. It would still only amount to one person in that stadium. As a new administration comes in, there are real questions about who, if anyone, can do just that. Elon Musk posting on his platform this weekend, quote, America is headed for bankruptcy super fast. Full panel here with me now. The point of that, Emily, is we talk about, maybe we're going to cut $1 billion here. Maybe we're going to cut $10 billion there. Okay, in a decade, we're going to have a $55 trillion national debt, and it hit $36 trillion over the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of talk and excitement, honestly, from Republicans about this Department of Government Efficiency.
Right.
There's going to be a new subcommittee. There's a Doge caucus. But when it gets right down to it, how do you cut government spending? That means Congress has to get together, actually cut spending. And they don't have a very good track record of doing that. And so even if they do cut spending on what they authorize every year and appropriate every year, that's still only a part of the federal budget. You're not even talking about Social Security, Medicare, entitlements.
That's the stuff you got to...
It's very difficult.
Right. This has been back and forth. Every Democrat, Republican, Ashley, they've spent through the roof. So why should we believe that your party will have fiscal restraint all of a sudden?
It's going to be very difficult. And I actually think that the American people, that's just noise right now. Can anyone even imagine what $1 trillion is?
Well, that's why I laid out that example, because it's like, how can you visualize this money? It's so hard to comprehend unless you think about it a different way.
Well, I was thinking today, there's $100 billion obviously asked for the hurricane relief funding that's, going to pass. It's another
$100 billion?
Mm-hmm.
Good Lord.
For North Carolina and Florida.
It's a lot of money.
And that doesn't need to be offset in any way, and that's going to pass. I mean, it may go down to 97, but
But the average American still doesn't get what those numbers mean. They don't feel it in their day-to-day lives, and until they do, I don't think anyone in America has an appetite to cut anything. Where's the Ozempic when you need it? Because otherwise they're going to keep spending, because I think what Chris said was nobody got run out of Washington for spending money. They get run out for cutting money.
And it wasn't even a campaign issue.
They do feel it. They just don't know that they're feeling it, because what is inflation except for, in part, driven by the constant juicing of the economy and the belief that we could never have a recession again. Right. It would somehow be possible we could banish recessions. I just want to say this. You're a lot of fun to watch football with. Yeah? No, because your poor family, you're there, you're watching this game, and you're like, now what if each of those people...
Did you see how that game ended? They rushed the field. They had to get them off. They did one more play. And I'm like, how can I show 36 trillion to 55 trillion? I came up with that idea.
No hate on ASU, but I think we've lowered the standards for field rushing these days if we're going out against
they took the goalpost down.
It's a lot. It's too much.
Meantime, Joe Rogan has solidified himself as one of the most influential political voices this election season. And now he's turning his gaze toward the Ukraine war, and he's not holding back. Watch.
What I don't feel safer is right now they're launching missiles into Russia. Zelensky says Putin is terrified. You, man. You people. You people are about to start World War III.
That, of course, prompted plenty of responses, including this video from the Ukrainian boxing champ Vladimir Klitschko, whose brother is the mayor of Kyiv.
You talk about these American weapons being sent to Ukraine, which you believe will lead to the Third World War. So let me tell you that you're repeating Russian propaganda.
So whatever you think about, Emily, the future of all this, there's going to be hard decisions for the Republican Party on what to do next, because you have some voices say, we need to do this, and you have many others who say, no, this is the military-industrial complex at play.
Absolutely, and this is something within the Republican Party, especially as they take unified control of government here, to keep an eye on, because there are still the Republicans who very much want to help Ukraine fend off Russia, but they do have a lot of the America First wing saying no more money to Ukraine, and Congress is going to have to deal with those questions.
What happens here?
Mitch McConnell, that's why he took over the subcommittee for
rules.
Defense.
Yeah.
Well, rules and defense. I mean, he's going to be in charge of that in regards to the Senate. But I think it's a tough issue, because I don't think that the everyday American wants us to be fighting in Ukraine, because they're worrying about how they're paying for their groceries every day. And they hear these billions of dollars being spent on somewhere that they don't even maybe know where it is. It's a tough issue.
I can't sound like Donald Trump like you can, but Donald Trump said he was going to end the war, and he's the only one that could end it. I think he could end it by negotiating a deal with both sides, but the whole land piece and who wants to give up land or who doesn't, and given that both sides are in each other's countries, makes it really, really difficult.
Let me leave you with this, Chris. There was a piece out in Semaphore. Get me on Rogan. PR scrambles to navigate new media. What impact, if any, do you think he has in the in the upcoming years. We saw the impact he had potentially down the home stretch.
Well, I'd put it this way. We've talked a lot about what the media does, media this, media that. I think we can sort of throw that out. I think the mainstream media is dead. Whatever it ever was, it's over now. And now you have to be specific and talk about individual outlets. Does Joe Rogan have a lot of throw weight? Absolutely. Huge listenership, huge audience. Does the New York Times have a lot of throw weight? Yeah. But I don't think we can talk about a monolithic media the way that we could when I was a kid or starting in the industry. I think you have to look at each outlet and each source for itself, and you have to look at what they're doing, not as part of a whole.
You're here and judge us what we're doing here at NewsNation. Heck yeah. Put us up against anyone.
Doing budget math on football games.
Thank you all.
Calling the election first.
That's right.
Appreciate it. Other side of the break, President-elect Trump takes office in 56 days, but tensions are already heating up with the California Governor Gavin Newsom. Did you see what he did? And who he might be singling out? Other side of the break, Leland Vittert joins me. Hill on NewsNation. So the showdown between Gavin Newsom and President-elect Donald Trump continues as the California governor attempts to resist Trump's influence in the Golden State. Now, Newsom is now promising to continue offering the $7,500 tax credit for electric vehicles if Trump makes good on his campaign promise to do away with it on a federal level. Joining me now, host of On Balance, Leland Vittert. And oh, by the way, in California, the company that they're exempting from this?
Tesla. Which makes a lot of its cars
in California, is the leader in the industry, and you know why. Gavin Newsom is doing this for lots of reasons, including he's unofficially announcing here that he's running for president.
Well, Kamala Harris already beat him to it. But what I would say, and what I think is interesting, is this is a phenomenal way to win the Democratic primary.
Yep.
Whether or not this is going to win a Democratic election, the last election tells us no. And by the way, Joe Biden winning the general election in 2020 was by running